welcome to episode 72 of your CYSA Plus Prepcast. In today's session, we will explore the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, also known as CVSS, and examine how cybersecurity analysts apply it to assess and prioritize vulnerabilities in a standardized and defensible manner. CVSS is a globally accepted framework that enables security teams to communicate the severity of vulnerabilities in a consistent way. Analysts rely on CVSS scores to determine remediation urgency, align with regulatory standards, and communicate technical risk to decision-makers. Understanding how the scoring works and what each metric represents is not only a crucial skill for daily security operations, but is also essential for success on the CYSA Plus exam. Let's begin by defining CVSS. The Common Vulnerability Scoring System is a structured methodology developed to quantify the severity of vulnerabilities using numerical scores and descriptive metrics. These scores range from 0 to 10 and are calculated using multiple factors that influence how a vulnerability could be exploited and how severe the resulting impact would be. CVSS provides a standardized method for comparing vulnerabilities, supporting consistency across different teams, vendors, and organizations. It enables analysts to prioritize risks effectively and allocate remediation resources based on objective criteria rather than subjective judgment. CVSS scoring helps analysts categorize vulnerabilities by severity. Scores are often grouped into bands, such as low, medium, high, and critical. A vulnerability with a CVSS score of 9.8, for instance, is considered critical and demands immediate attention. On the other hand, a score of 4.3 might represent a moderate risk that can be addressed during routine maintenance cycles. These classifications help establish thresholds for escalation, reporting, and compliance management, ensuring that vulnerabilities are addressed in proportion to their risk level. Analysts typically use the most recent version of CVSS, which is version 3.1. This version was introduced to refine earlier scoring methods and to address feedback from the cybersecurity community. CVSS 3.1 introduced clarifications and adjustments to metric definitions, making it easier for analysts to apply the framework consistently. The version in use is important because it influences how specific metrics are interpreted and how scores are calculated. Staying current with the latest version ensures that analysts are aligning with accepted industry practices. CVSS consists of three primary metric groups: base metrics, temporal metrics, and environmental metrics. Each group serves a specific purpose in the scoring process. The base metrics provide a fixed score that represents the intrinsic qualities of a vulnerability, independent of environment or time. Temporal metrics allow analysts to adjust the score based on evolving factors, such as the availability of exploit code or the confidence level in the vulnerability report. Environmental metrics further tailor the score to reflect the specific impact of the vulnerability within a given organization. Base metrics are the foundation of any CVSS score. They measure the characteristics of the vulnerability that remain constant regardless of context. These metrics include attack vector, attack complexity, required privileges, user interaction, and the potential impact on confidentiality, integrity, and availability. By evaluating these factors, analysts can determine how easy a vulnerability is to exploit and how damaging it would be if exploited. The base metrics score is usually the first number reported when discussing a vulnerability and serves as a starting point for further evaluation. Attack complexity is one of the most critical metrics in the base group. It assesses how difficult it is for an attacker to successfully exploit a vulnerability. A low complexity score means the exploit is relatively straightforward and does not require special conditions or timing. A high complexity score indicates that exploitation is more challenging, perhaps requiring race conditions, precise timing, or attacker knowledge of system internal. This distinction helps analysts understand the likelihood of exploitation in practical scenarios. Attack vector describes how an attacker would need to interact with the target system to exploit the vulnerability. Possible vectors include network, adjacent network, local, or physical access. Network-based vulnerabilities generally receive higher severity scores because they can be exploited remotely often without prior access. Local or physical vulnerabilities, while still serious, require the attacker to be closer to the system, which may reduce the overall risk level, depending on organizational context. Impact metrics focus on the outcome of a successful exploit. They evaluate the potential damage to data confidentiality, system integrity, and service availability. A vulnerability that allows unauthorized data access affects confidentiality. One that lets an attacker modify system files or inject malicious code compromises integrity. If the vulnerability can be used to shut down services or systems, it impacts availability. High-impact scores across these categories usually indicate that the vulnerability is critical and should be addressed urgently. Temporal metrics add a dynamic layer to the score. These metrics consider the availability of exploit code, whether a patch exists, and the confidence in the report. As time progresses and new information becomes available, these metrics help refine the base score to reflect current threat conditions. Analysts update temporal metrics when exploit kits are published, patches are released, or better intelligence emerges. This helps maintain an accurate view of the risk and supports more informed prioritization. Environmental metrics allow analysts to adjust the CVSS score based on local conditions. For example, a vulnerability may have a high base score, but may not be relevant to a system that is fully isolated or protected by compensating controls. Conversely, a moderate vulnerability may become more dangerous if it affects a critical system or a service with no redundancy. Analysts use environmental metrics to fine-tune vulnerability assessments to reflect their organization's specific environment, making the scores more actionable. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are more security courses on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Analysts commonly use CVSS scores to systematically prioritize vulnerability remediation efforts. When vulnerabilities are identified during scanning or incident analysis, the CVSS score provides a starting point for determining response urgency. Scores above 7 are typically treated as high or critical and are addressed immediately to minimize exposure. Scores in the moderate range may be scheduled for remediation during the next patch cycle, while low scores are often tracked but assigned a lower priority. This standardized approach allows security teams to focus on the most pressing risks without being overwhelmed by less severe issues. Effective CVSS-based vulnerability management requires detailed asset classification. Analysts must consider which systems are most critical to the business, which contain sensitive data, and which are exposed to external access. By integrating environmental metrics into the scoring process, analysts can adjust the base score to reflect these business realities. For example, a vulnerability on a low-importance test server may be deprioritized, while the same vulnerability on a production web server might be escalated. This context-sensitive scoring leads to better alignment between technical risk and business impact. Centralized vulnerability management systems often include built-in support for CVSS scoring. These platforms allow analysts to import scan results, automatically calculate or display CVSS scores, and assign remediation tasks based on severity. Scores can also be used to filter dashboards, trigger alerts, or initiate automated workflow. When CVSS scoring is integrated into daily operations, it enables consistent prioritization and supports structured reporting to security leaders, auditors, and other stakeholders. This consistency improves both efficiency and accountability across the vulnerability management process. To strengthen prioritization further, analysts correlate CVSS scores with real-time threat intelligence. A vulnerability with a CVSS score of 8.5 might be considered high priority on its own, but if it is also being actively exploited in the wild or linked to a specific threat campaign, it becomes a critical priority. Conversely, a vulnerability with a similar score but no current threat activity might be addressed more methodically. This threat-informed prioritization helps ensure that limited remediation resources are directed toward the most relevant and impactful issues. Documenting CVSS scoring decisions is essential for transparency and compliance. Analysts maintain records that show how metrics were selected, why certain vulnerabilities were prioritized, and how remediation was performed. This documentation supports internal policy enforcement, prepares the organization for audits, and provides traceability during incident investigations. It also allows teams to learn from past assessments and refine their processes over time. Clear records help ensure that vulnerability management remains defensible and repeatable across analysts and teams. Over time, vulnerability conditions may change, and so must CVSS scores. Regular validation of existing vulnerability data ensures that scores reflect the most current information. Analysts may revise temporal metrics if a patch becomes available, if exploit code is published, or if new research increases confidence in a vulnerability's impact. Environmental metrics may also be updated if the affected system changes role, if new security controls are added, or if the business function of the asset shifts. Ongoing validation helps keep assessments accurate and supports agile risk response. Communication is a key part of applying CVSS effectively. Analysts share scoring rationale and remediation priorities with system owners, developers, business units, and leadership teams. This helps ensure that stakeholders understand why certain issues are urgent and what steps are required to address them. Clear communication also supports remediation planning by aligning technical recommendations with operational constraints. When scoring and prioritization are well understood across the organization, vulnerability response becomes more coordinated and effective. Ongoing analyst training in CVSS is essential for accuracy and consistency. Analysts study metric definitions, practice scoring various vulnerabilities, and participate in workshops that reinforce accurate scoring and prioritization. Training may include working through real-world vulnerability scenarios, evaluating scoring discrepancies, and reviewing industry case studies. This experience helps analysts avoid common pitfalls such as inconsistent metric interpretation or over-reliance on scanner-generated scores. Strong training programs build confidence and reduce variability across scoring decisions. Risk assessments based on CVSS scores provide organizations with strategic insights into their security posture. Analysts use the scores to calculate risk exposure for different asset groups, departments, or business units. They also combine CVSS data with asset classification and security control assessments to identify gaps in the organization's defenses. These assessments help justify budget requests, inform security investments, and align cybersecurity efforts with business objectives. CVSS scoring supports both tactical remediation and long-term security planning. Mastering the common vulnerability scoring system supports more than just daily vulnerability management. It underpins the entire risk management process. CVSS enables analysts to take a structured, repeatable approach to evaluating vulnerabilities, reducing subjectivity and increasing transparency. It empowers organizations to prioritize remediation intelligently, allocate resources effectively, and demonstrate accountability in security decision-making. These skills are foundational to the CVSS Plus certification and essential for analysts working in fast-paced, high-risk environments where informed decisions make all the difference. To summarize Episode 72, mastering the common vulnerability scoring system allows cybersecurity analysts to systematically assess, prioritize, and manage vulnerabilities with precision and clarity. Understanding how to interpret base, temporal, and environmental metrics equips analysts to apply risk-based decision-making in real time. CVSS scoring supports accurate remediation prioritization, streamlined reporting, and compliance alignment. Proficiency in CVSS methodology directly supports CVSS Plus exam success and is fundamental to maintaining a strong and responsive cybersecurity posture. Stay tuned as we continue your detailed journey towards CVSS Plus certification success. Thanks for listening. To learn more about cybersecurity, please visit baremetalcyber.com. There you will find best-selling books, videos, and even more free cybersecurity training courses. Please subscribe to the Prepcast and our various podcasts. And thanks for listening.